Well, hey, how's everybody doing? Good. Did you enjoy spring on Thursday and summer on Friday? Isn't that awesome? Yeah, back to fall today, and I think snow tomorrow or something. So it's awesome. All 4 seasons in 4 days. Well, I'm glad you're here. This would have been a really good day to stay in bed. So I'm glad you made it. Well, we're in a series that we're calling Control Freaks. And the idea behind this series is there's so much of life that we can't control. But there are some things that we can control, and what we want to talk today, last week we talked about the illusion of control. I drew a circle up here, and I'll draw that again. And we said this circle kind of represents our life and everything in it that we can control. We talked about some things that we can control, like our time and our money and sometimes people in there and so on. But we also said that sometimes in a catastrophe, something tragic happens to us in our lives, and we even lose control of these things. And what we're going to discover as we look at the life of Joseph today, that here's a young man who really had no control in his life. He's a slave, he's a prisoner at 2 different points, and he has no control over his life. And how he maintained through that and even succeeded, I think there's some incredible lessons for us. Now, last week when I talked about this circle, I also mentioned this idea that this has a door in it. So, every circle, our lives have a door in it that can only be opened from the inside. You control the door into your life. Okay? That means you control what comes in. And remember last week we mentioned every time something comes into your life, what happens? What does it trigger? Something has to go out. So whether it's your attention, whether it's what you're focused on, whether it's people in your life, whether it's that new project, take on a new puppy. It's just a puppy. But man, it just rules your life for a while, doesn't it? Got to get home because puppy needs to be let out. Got to get home, got to feed the puppy, and it does. It just kind of rules. And so our life many times are subject to things that sometimes we can control or not. And then we talked about God. Where's God in this picture? Well, we said God is sovereign and that God's in control of everything ultimately. But God also respects us. And He's given us a will. And so God does not enter into our lives unless He's invited. So you can come to church your whole life, but never really have God in your life. He doesn't influence the decisions you make. He doesn't influence anything in here. And He stays on the outside. That's why Jesus said in Revelation, or John said in Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, Jesus said, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock." Jesus, outside, knocking, waiting, wanting to come in, wanting to just have relationship with us, wanting to take the messes that we've created them and to form them into something good. Even all of our scars from our bad decisions maybe. But He will not come in unless He's invited. So today we're going to see the relationship that Joseph, we're studying about, had with God, the circumstances he went through, what he learned he could control and couldn't, and how he succeeded. Now, we talked a little bit about Joseph last week, a little bit of his background. 14 chapters of the Old Testament, from Genesis 37 to 50, is the life of Joseph. And what we're going to see is that when Joseph went through all of his adversity, he got to the place where he had nothing. And this is really where God needed him to be. Because if you remember from last week's, as we start out with his story, he's young, he's the 11th of 12 sons, but yet he's his daddy's favorite. And he's really kind of spoiled. His dad treats him special. He knows he's special. He wears his coat of many colors, which was like a giant target on his back. His dad sends him out to check on his brothers who were working. Apparently he wasn't. He gets to his brothers. They're not doing right. He runs back and tells his dad, So he's a tattletale, spoiled, selfish, entitled. Just that little kid that you don't like. And God needed to work something in him. This is a privileged child. He's one with the silver spoon in his mouth. And what God has to do in his life is take some of that down. He's got to work humility in his life. And we're going to see how that humility worked into his life and the impact it made. I want to look at 4 circumstances that he went through, 4 incidents. And we're going to get from this a little bit more insight into just what he experienced. First of all, he's sold into slavery by his brothers. Now, that's not a good day. You go out to check on your brothers, and they go, we hate this kid. We're going to kill him. That was their first plan. Actually, him not being killed was a better thing for him. In Genesis 37, it reads this way, verse 26. Then Judah said to his brothers, what profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let our hands not be upon him. Then his brother, for he is brother of our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. Then Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up, lifted him out of the pit, sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Again, these are your brothers. I don't think Joseph ever expected this. He just thought he was special. And he didn't realize how abrasive his personality was. How much it caused his own brothers to hate him. Some of you've been estranged from family. And you know that pain. When people that you love the most, or that should love you the most, don't. Because of circumstances, because of things that happen between you or things in their lives. And there's just this pain going on. And I said this in first service, it wasn't my notes, but I always encourage parents. Parents, you offer your child something that no one else can ever give them. And that's the unconditional love of a parent. Always keep your door open. Always create a pathway for them to come home. No matter what's going on, no matter how far they get, no matter what happens in their life. That doesn't mean you have to let them in and let them destroy your life and house and everything else. But they need to always know, regardless, that mom and dad love me. That there's always a way to get home. Because sometimes that's the only lifeline that person has. And like I said, some of you are in that place. And you can't go home. Or maybe you've closed the door to your kids coming home. And I encourage you, let God work in you. A lot of times it's just frustration on your part. You're angry, you're maybe scared or nervous about that. But I believe if you do the right thing, if you trust God, it may be the very thing that changes that child's life. Secondly, he's not only sold into slavery, but he's bought by this guy Potiphar. And it says, now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and the Lord caused all he did to succeed at his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight, and he attended him. And he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in his house and field. Now, Joseph is not, I can't imagine the mindset. He's been sold by his brothers in a foreign country. He's bought by this guy that's probably pretty tough because he's the captain of the Egyptian guard. So probably a no-nonsense guy. He's not going to go easy on Joseph. But what does Joseph do? Somehow he just responds right. He just trusts that God is with him. And so much so that everything he does, God blesses, to the point where Potiphar recognizes, God is blessing my house, his God. I don't even know this God. But he's blessing me because of this person. I think about that. How do we apply that? Every one of you are going to get up tomorrow, go to school, go to work, or just get up at home and have responsibilities there. And you can either curse what you do, where you go, the people there, or you can bless it. And if you bless your workplace, God will bless it. If you curse it, it'll be cursed. It'll just be reinforced. I hate this place. I don't like the people there. I don't like my boss. Guess what kind of day you're going to have? Just another day. But if I go in, I go, this place is blessed because I'm here. Why? Because the presence of God goes with me every place I go. So I can change this place. I can encourage people. I can bless my boss. I don't know what they're going through, but I'm going to have a right attitude. And that's what Joseph did. Jeremiah told the people before the Israelites, before they were taken to Babylon hundreds of years later and in captivity, and he said, bless that city where you're taking to and where you're captive, because as God blesses it, you'll be blessed as well. See? You won't get out of your place by criticizing it. God's not going to deliver you from where you are just because you complain a lot. If you bless that place, he'll either promote you there or he'll promote you out. Because what's God doing? He's using those circumstances to shape your life. And we're going to see that pattern happening a lot with Joseph. So, things are seeming to look up for Joseph. But then, there's Potiphar's wife, his slave master's wife. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there, she caught him by the garment and said, lie with me. Not just taking a nap, okay? But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. Smart thing to do. Just run, flee, get out of there. It may cost you your coat, you don't care. You're going to run. That's what Joseph does. Now, that's the right thing to do. A lot of men would not have done that. Especially if you're a slave. She's my boss. You know, I'm just trying to please the boss. You can justify all kinds of stuff. But he didn't. He did the right thing, even when it would have been so convenient to do the wrong thing. It's not like he was dating a lot, okay? There wasn't like, slave websites where you could go and find other slaves to date and stuff like that, He was getting no action, Let's just be honest. And so this would have been an opportunity for him to just be fulfilled. And yet, he doesn't. Now, wouldn't this be a great place for God to be nice to him? Just throw him a bone or something? I mean, hey, I know you've been a slave. I know you're hurting. You resisted this temptation. Here's what I'm going to do for you. What does God do? Apparently nothing. Because this is what happens next. And Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, in the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And there he was in prison. So he does the right thing. He's already a slave, and now he's falsely accused and gets thrown into prison. Now that's just bad, That's a hard day. How do you reason that? Do you think you might be tempted to go, hey, God, come on. I'm doing the right stuff. I'm doing as good as I can, and yet I go from a slave to being a prisoner? if we don't understand what God was doing in this process, if we don't understand the bigger picture that God was shaping his character, then we just look at the circumstances like we do many times in our own life. We just look at the circumstances and go, well, if God really wants me to be happy, because that's what I want, then I wouldn't be suffering in this way. But God has a higher motive. It's just like us as parents. We want our kids to be healthy. We want to be responsible. We want to be good people with character. So we're constantly working on that. We're constantly correcting and helping and encouraging. Last week, Lori and I had the opportunity to meet Lou Holtz, and who was a former coach for Notre Dame football. And he was speaking at this event. We got to meet briefly beforehand, and he was talking about shaping young men and shaping character. And he told one story. He said, I had this kid who was a really great quarterback, but one season he had like 17 interceptions. He said, so I sat down with him at the end of the season and said, you had a really good year, but you threw 17 interceptions. And he goes, yeah, Coach, I know, I shouldn't have done that, and try to get better. And he said, well, next year, you're not going to throw 7 interceptions. He goes, wow, thanks, Coach. I appreciate the confidence in me. He goes, no, it's no confidence. I'm going to bench you after you throw 6. You're never going to get to 7, I mean, Lou was tough on those guys, But if you ever had a tough teacher in school or a coach or somebody like that, at the end of the year, they're the ones that you appreciate. Because if something good came into your life, it came through them being tough on you. Not mean, but I mean tough. And we need people in our lives that way. Joseph realized what God was doing. He must have. So he didn't give up. And look what happens. The Lord was with Joseph in prison and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Are you seeing a pattern here? Joseph just, in every situation, he just responds rightly. He trusts God, and God so obviously works on his behalf that the people can see this is God at work through his life. I love that. I love that one particular line. It says here, whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. He didn't take the approach, well, I'm in the union and that's not my job. He didn't take the approach, well, I don't get paid enough to do that. Well, everybody else isn't doing it. He didn't have that kind of perspective. Now, I know that there are employers that just abuse their employees. I realize that. But I also believe the love and the grace of God can cause you to rise above anything the enemy can do through them. Because greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. So no matter what kind of circumstances you're under, I believe God can help you to rise to the top. You just have to be willing at times to, again, what God's working in him, humble yourself. And that's the challenge. Then Joseph has 2 friends in prison with him. They've both been former people that served the Pharaoh. And they both had dreams. And so he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with him in custody in his master's house, why are your faces so downcast today? He said, we've had dreams and there's no one to interpret them. And Joseph said, do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me. Joseph, he then interprets their dreams. And then he says this, only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me a kindness and mention me to Pharaoh. So get me out of this house, for I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I've done nothing that should put me in the pit. So Joseph says, maybe this is my way out. Maybe they'll remember me. Maybe I can find freedom here. But look what happens. Yet, verse 23 of chapter 40, yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him.
He was only out because Joseph interpreted his dream. Once again, now, if you're keeping score, this is 15 people so far that have betrayed Joseph. 11 brothers, Potiphar's wife, Potiphar, and his 2 friends in prison. You think this might cause you to isolate yourself and not want to trust people? I know some people, they go on a bad date. I'm never getting married. I'm never going out again, you know. I mean, Joseph had every right to reject people, to isolate himself, to not put himself in that risk again. But even though everybody, it seemed, was against him, God was still for him. So how did he survive? Well, first of all, he never lost his perspective. And if you're filling in the blanks there, what Joseph could control, what was in his circle when nothing else was, he could control his attitude, he could control his behavior. I think I listed them as actually attitude, behavior, and actions. You know, behavior just how you respond to people and so on, and then your actions. Because he just went to work. He just was kind. I don't think he would have been put over Potiphar's house or put over the prison if he'd had a bad attitude or his behavior wasn't one that was exemplary or if his actions didn't reflect those perspectives. But here's how he succeeded. 3 things I want to share with you as we close or go on this portion of the message that I believe will really help you apply to your life lessons that Joseph learned. First one is this: Joseph never gave up on God. He never quit on God, ever. I mean, I'm sure there were some dark nights of the soul. And he certainly probably expressed a lot of questioning and maybe wrestled with those things. But he never got to the place where it so frustrated him that he turned his back on God and rebelled against him. And said, God, I'm not going to follow you. I'm not going to trust you. Let me tell you, folks, this is a big deal. I've watched people that have just, life has been tough on them. They've been disappointed, and they immediately turn against God and say, I'm not believing you. I'm not trusting you. I mean, they just forget about God. Well, what's left if God's not in your circle? All that's left in there at this point, and all that's kind of been the center of your life up until then, is you. And if you is all you have in your circle, you're in trouble. I don't know about you, but I tend to do this. I face some type of challenge, and I think, okay, how am I going to figure this out? What are my resources? My own ability, other things, what resources do I have? How's this going to work out? And then after I do that a little bit and realize, oh gosh, I don't really trust any of those things, especially myself. And I go, wait a minute, there's God, the ruler of the universe. The God who loves me enough to die for me. The God who has endless resources. That Paul says blesses us according to His riches in glory. If that God is available, why not just turn to Him immediately? Now, there are certain areas of my life I've learned to do that with, especially like with the church. If the church is going through anything or I'm feeling stress, I just go, God, it's your church. You better do something. Because I can't fix this thing, This is way beyond my control now. It's too big. I can't, care for all these people. I can't fix their lives. I can't, balance a budget, do all that. It's your church. And I sleep well when it comes to those things. Because God just proves Himself again and again and again. I mean, every new conflict, let's face it, God can come through and do a miracle for you today, but tomorrow you get up, you face a new problem, it's like yesterday's out the window, isn't it? We'd like to think that we've learned all these lessons, so now, I believe God, it's easy, but every new blow in life is like a fresh punch in the face. And so how we react is key. So he never gave up. Secondly, Joseph never gave up on his dreams. He never quit. He knew that God had designed him to live a life that's fulfilled, a life with purpose and meaning. And for every one of you here today, God has that. And we say that a lot, but it is so true. I know what it is. Like I said, I went through a period just a few months ago where there was a lot of pressures in life. And I realized that every day I was getting up and just thinking about getting through the end of the day. Or maybe the end of the week. And then, God just helped me. And I found myself a few weeks ago, I was prepping a message and sitting at home and reading, and I started thinking about some things in the future, and I started thinking about some things we wanted to do in the church and some new outreaches and new initiatives we wanted to start and everything. And I realized, wow, I'm dreaming months and years ahead about the church. And I haven't done that for a while. Why? Because when you're in the middle of a crisis, it's like right here. And it takes so much energy. And it takes so much of your time. And that's all you can think about. Unless you can see God. And if you're looking at your problem and seeing God on the other side of it, that's the wrong perspective. You need to change those around. If you see God, then your problem's going to get smaller. It's going to get further away. It's going to be something He can handle. You bring God close, He gets big, problem gets small. Scott talked about that a few weeks ago. So this is the perspective that we have to have. For some of you, you've made some really bad decisions in life, and you are where you are. Others of you are under a burden of financial crisis. Others are, facing all kinds of situations. But here's what I know. I talk to a lot of people that are hurting all the time through chaplaincy and through crisis intervention in people's lives, as well as being a pastor. And there are people that I run into all the time that have a reason for why they are where they are. They're sitting on a bar stool somewhere, just drinking their life away. And you think, why are you here? Well, because this happened. This person did this to me. I was betrayed. I was falsely accused. I didn't get the opportunities. Something. And they're all legitimate reasons. But so what? So what if you've got an excuse to sit there, spend your money, and tell your story to people that don't care? What good is that? You're never going to go anywhere. It's not until you wake up and go, wait a minute. This is not the life God intended. This is a big mess, but God can untangle this. God can change things. But what does it take? It takes some humility on our part. Because here's the last thing that Joseph refused to do. He never became a victim. Joseph never became a victim. This victim mentality is so detrimental to us. Like I said, I realize there are legitimate pains and things that people have done to some of you that you had no control over, and it's affected your life. I get that. But I believe to my core that God is bigger. And He can use those very pains in your life and the stuff you went through for good. It doesn't mean it was good what happened. It just means God can make good come from it somehow. But you'll never know that if you just stay in that pain and stay locked away, because what victims do is they close the door because they can't be hurt anymore. And so this place starts to fill up with your own air. And with the air you're breathing, your attitude in here becomes the air you breathe. And the air in here is filled with me first, self-preservation, really pride. It says, I'm not letting anybody out or in. I'm not coming out. I'm just going to stay here. It would have been so easy for Joseph to go, look, I'm not going to work in prison. I'm in prison. Come on. I'm just going to stay in my cell. I'm not going to work hard for them. Why should I? But instead, he never became a victim. He goes, hey, I'm in jail. I'm going to make this the best jail there can be. Whatever. Maybe you've got to just say this. I'm going to make this the best marriage it can be. I'm going to make the best home this can be. Yeah, we don't have resources, but it can be clean. Yeah, it can't be, the best situation, but we can make it better with God's help. This is what God is challenging us to do. Joseph never became a victim. Joseph learned that he had to lean into God because ultimately we cannot control our lives. And he didn't just sit there and take everything in. Faith is active. Faith is active. It does something. It says, tomorrow I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to bless the place. I'm going to encourage people. I'm going to go to school and try. I'm going to listen. I'm going to start today and change the trajectory of my life. Because nothing happens until you open this door and let God come in and you come out a different person. That's the only hope that you have. And that's the way God set it up. He made it so that He's the only escape in life. Why? Because He's crazy in love with you. And He's guiding everything toward Him. And all the time we try to resist and go some other direction, God just is channeling you back to Himself. So just cooperate with it. Don't fight against God, you'll lose. Jesus said this in Luke 17. He said, all who are obsessed with being secure in life, making their own way, He said, you're going to lose it all, including your life. But those who let go of their lives and surrender them to me will discover true life. He also said, so don't follow me without considering what it costs you. This is going to cost you something. He is going to set up His throne in this circle. He is wanting to rule inside this circle. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ. Not a token thing, little spot here or there on Sundays. He wants to rule in here. And when He does, He said, unless you surrender all to me, giving up all you possess, you cannot be my disciples. Now, that doesn't mean giving up all you possess in the sense that you can't have anything. You just can't possess stuff, Having things and holding them loosely and letting them belong to God is one thing. Feeling like you earned it, you deserved it, it's yours, and nobody can touch it is what Jesus was speaking against. And He has ways of just causing the bottom to fall out of everything you're holding on to. Why? Because He doesn't want you consumed with that. So hold things loosely. Put Him at the center of this circle. And if you do, life will be a whole lot better. Last fill in the blank there is this. And it should be pretty obvious. If God's in control, you don't have to be. If God's in control, I don't have to be. But what I have to do is I have to open the door, invite Him in, and let Him rule inside my circle. And if I will, He'll take me places I could never get to on my own. So I encourage you today, don't give up on God. Don't give up on your dreams. Don't allow yourself to become a victim, even for a moment. And if you'll do that, I believe that God has an incredible life for you. Here, some good news about Joseph. Let me read a verse real quick. A couple verses about Joseph. It really turns out okay for him, So the king, or Pharaoh, has this dream. And then suddenly his cupbearer wakes up and goes, oh, wait a minute. I remember this guy I was in prison with. I'm out today because of him. Funny, I forgot about him. So Pharaoh calls for Joseph because nobody can interpret this dream. All of his wisest guys, they can't do it. So Pharaoh said to his servants, after Joseph interprets a dream, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of the Lord, or Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all of my people shall order themselves as you command. Only in regards to the throne will I be greater than you. Wow! In one day, in one meeting, he goes from a slave to a prisoner to the palace in one moment. God can change your entire circumstances like that. And what we do is we set ourselves up to have God do that by cooperating with Him. I think God's ready to do this, and we're over here somewhere chasing our thing. And we get a little closer, and He goes, and then we chase something over here. But when we're alongside Him, He says, now's the time. This is your moment. This is your destiny. You've been faithful in little. Now, this is what I have for you. Now, that's just not pipe dream stuff, folks. That's what Jesus came to die for. An abundant life for you. A life that you were created uniquely to fulfill. And the only way you get to do it is if you walk with Him.